Welcome to Focus Today. We have a show packed with wonderful guests this morning, and our first guest is Shawnee Dale. She's a therapeutic foster care certifier with Family Solutions, and today we're talking about the needs for foster care families here in the Rogue Valley, especially for children with behavioral, emotional, and developmental disabilities. So Shawnee, I want to start by asking you about Family Solutions and what it is.
Family Solutions is a nonprofit organization that helps children and families that are in need of counseling, and we typically work with kids that are in DHS care and custody that have emotional and behavioral disabilities. We have various different programs. We have 2 group homes. One's a boys group home, and it's located in Central Point. There's a girls group home that's located in Medford, and both homes, the girls group home holds 8 girls right now, and the boys group home holds 9 boys. And we also have a day treatment program for kids that are having a hard time in school. There's one in Ashland and one in Grants Pass, and we have an outpatient program. We also have therapeutic foster care, which is the program that I work in, and we have a school-based, skills-based program that our skills coaches and counselors go into schools and help with some of the needs of the children in schools.
And the website for your organization is familysolutions.org?
Yes.
Okay, easy. All right, so foster care, let's talk about the need of foster care. So do you have numbers? Do you know how prevalent the problem is here in the Rogue Valley?
Well, what I know, and I give referrals every single day for kids that are in need of services based on, we are a higher level of care for foster care. So there's regular DHS care. There's our level of care, which is therapeutic foster care, and then there's residential care. And most of the kids that are having a hard time in regular DHS care due to trauma history or mental health concerns, disabilities that they have acquired through some of the abuse and neglect that they experienced at a young age, that are really having a hard time emotionally regulating themselves. They tend to be harder to handle in a typical foster home. So they refer to our program. We get referrals from all over the state of Oregon. So right now we have a ton of referrals and little to no homes.
So you have kids that have those problems from all over the states coming to your office in Medford, and you need to find families. And so what kind of families are you looking for those kids? What are the credentials?
We're looking for a stable, structured home. We do a rigorous training process where I'm the trainer, and I train the families for 34 hours of initial training. The therapeutic foster home is a skill-based home, so we expect it's like treatment within the home. Our foster parents have to have the ability to be able to teach skills, recognize that these kids have lagging skills, and that's basically why they become deregulated sometimes, and be able to take guidance. We have a team of a case manager, a skills coach, and a therapist that assists them and the child. And I'm always in the background being able to train and assist the foster families, and I keep up on their certifications. They do progress notes to help with the treatment of the kids.
So you're never alone in this? You're not
never
just taking
alone.
the kid on your own?
And we only place one child in a home at a time, based on the fact that these kids really need some individualized care.
So with the kids, I think a lot of people have the intention to help, but it's a little scary when you hear behavioral problems, emotional disability. Can you describe those kids? I mean, are they really that scary, or they just need a little more love and care?
A lot of times what I've found out, and I've done this line of work for about 6 years, 3 years as a case manager, and I've worked in schools, I've worked in the juvenile detention facility, overall over a 10-year span. And what I've learned with kids with behavioral and emotional disabilities is they're scared and they need to feel safe. They need to know that their environment's safe, that their caretakers are safe, and that their whole world, I mean, is predictable, and that they're going to be safe. So when you first get them, they're more probably deregulated than most. We are constantly here for support. Some of them have aggressive behaviors. Some of them have emotional outbursts. If I always look at it, instead of looking at their cognitive age, which is or linear age, look at their cognitive age. And their cognitive age is based on their trauma history. So they may be 12, maybe acting like they're 8 or sometimes 4. And so you have this large child that may be throwing a tantrum. Do they stabilize? Certainly. Do they become, as time goes by and you can go through the hurdles with them, they become more stabilized. They're able to feel safe. Their emotional outbursts are less and less. And that just takes time. It's like climbing a mountain. You know, if you look up, you're never going to make it to the top of the mountain. But if you continue to look down and just keep going and walk over the hurdles and walk over the rocks and get to the top, you'll see an amazing view. And that's how these kids are. And they're amazing. They have such good strengths. And that's what we pull from.
How long usually is the duration that the families take the kids in, or is it kind of indefinite? How?
Well, most of the kids that are in our care, the state has guardianship over. We do voluntary cases as well, but in the most part, these kids need a permanent placement. Okay. So we try our best to match our homes. These kids have been moved 20 different times in their life, and they really need to feel secure.
What happens to those that don't get placed?
A lot of times it's hard. Right now, I have a lot of calls saying, they may stay the night in the DHS office and until we find an emergency bed for them, and then they're going to be moved again. Or if there's, the shelters are full, the residential facilities in the state are full. We really need families that are just great and stable, and you don't have to be perfect, and you can be different. These kids are different, and I work well to find out what's matching. If behaviors that you can't handle or just don't want to go there, it's okay. I won't place a child in your home that's something that you can't handle. So it's really just a lot of communication.
Are families allowed to share their faith?
Yes. Yes, they are. We based on what it says is we want to make sure that the child's needs are being met and they feel safe. We encourage any type of positive interactions with these kids. Anything that's going to be positive and fuel their strengths. Kids thrive in faith-based homes. Now, that being said, you can't force a child to do something they don't want to do. That's definitely not okay, and if they feel strongly, but again, it's a matching process. So if I was to match kids with faith-based homes, I would certainly look at both sides and say, hey, are you open to this? And if they are, it's a very positive experience for them, and they feel connected because there's a lot of youth groups, there's a lot of peers that wrap around them. It's amazing what could be done in homes such as that.
Yeah, because you think even if they're defiant and different in their behavior, there must be a natural longing for a family.
There is. They want relationship. It's hard for them to step outside that box to continue to fuel a relationship because a lot of relationships in their past have been broken, whether by disruption or abuse, neglect. There's times where kids have been placed where it's just too much for the caregivers to handle, and it's time for them to go, and there's a huge disruption in their world, and they once again feel failure in relationship building.
And unwanted.
Right. So we really tried to establish relationship, what that looks like, walk through it. If you ever met a new friend or are courting somebody, for example, you're constantly going through these hurdles in your relationship building. And so that's kind of how it is when you have a new kid in your home.
So what does the process involves? If somebody out there right now is watching or listening to us and want to be part of it, and at least try out to see if they're even a match for a kid, what are the steps?
Well, the first step would be contacting me. My number is 541-776-0497, extension 206. And my email is sdale@solutions, with an S, or.org. And you can either email me, contact me, we'll set up an initial consultation and see, you know, I'm probably going to throw a lot of information, like, are you sure you want to do this? And let's talk about it and why, or, you know, if you have concerns. And I always want them to give me as many questions as possible that I can answer. It is a life-changing decision.
You want to deal with them before they get a child.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get a lot of calls and a lot of emails, because I know last we talked, you told me even there are kids staying in hotels right now because there's just no
there's
room.
been some over the holidays that DHS has called me and said, you know, it's unfortunate this little guy is going to be in a hotel this weekend. And it's just so hard, you know, and you scramble really hard to find something. And so the more homes available, we have respite homes, we have, if you can't commit to a full-time foster parenting position, these kids need extended, stable people in their life. So respite homes are amazing for our foster homes.
Okay.
So it's...
Well, contact Shawnee Dale if you're interested. They're at Family Solutions. Her number is 541-776-0497, extension 206, and email sdale@solutions.or.org. And the information about the Family Solutions and the need for foster care families are on the Dove website, the dove.us. Go to the events calendar and just look it up there. Every week we are asking more and more people to be involved. Shawnee, thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for having me on.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paulina and I work at the Dove TV. Did you know that when you support the Dove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us. Welcome back. Our next guest is Kathy Vobora, and we'll be talking about Bible smugglers and what it was like 40 years ago in Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. And here's our conversation with Kathy. Well, last time I went back to my homeland, Russia, there were churches being built everywhere. People were going to services, reading their Bibles, studying scriptures, believing in God, and really living the Bible. Well, but 40 years ago and 30 years ago and even 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. And today I'm joined in the studio by Kathy Vobora, who is someone that witnessed that Soviet Russia firsthand. She went there in the 70s, and now she has a book out, autobiography called Journey into Darkness. Welcome, Kathy. Thank you for being with us today. And I want to start by reading a paragraph that I saw on Amazon on your book page. She passes a border barrier for a hostile environment and answers questions from an abrupt guard speaking in another language. Inside her traveling partner's car is hidden Christian literature. Her name is Kathy Vobora, and she is a Bible smuggler. So I want to start this conversation by asking you, how do you become a Bible smuggler? I mean, did you grow up thinking about this?
I did not. Actually, it was a series of miracles that would take a long time to go over, but I'll try to be brief. I was living in San Francisco at the time. A pastor friend of mine visited Eastern Europe and Russia, and he actually smuggled Bibles into Czechoslovakia, which only happens to be my father's birth country. That is why my name is Vobora, Czech name. And he came back with his story, Kathy, I met Stefan, the director of a small group in Austria. They smuggle Bibles into Eastern Europe and Russia. He'd love for you to work for them. How about coming? And so in shock and awe, I said yes. And 4 months later, he called me in January of '75, actually. And in June of '75, I headed for Europe.
So what was it like, Russia, Eastern Europe back then?
Russia, Eastern Europe reminded me of America perhaps 100 years ago with the horse and the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And very picturesque, totally different world, which I enjoyed tremendously. Obviously vastly different from my home country of America.
Mm-hmm. And so as a Bible smuggler, I guess that was your main purpose to be there, right?
Yes.
Can you explain to us the process of that? How did you guys do it? Who was there? How did you went through security, if there was any?
Certainly. What we did is we went, my partner and I, a young Dutch woman from Holland, she and I were partners, and we went in as tourists. We obtained, of course, passports from our home countries, America and Holland, and then we always obtained a visa for the country we would be entering at that point in time. And we dressed like any tourist would, you know, two young women in their 20s at that point in time. And when we came to the border, one particular border guard asked us, actually, he said, well, are you smuggling anything in? And we said, we just smiled and said no. And we thought to ourselves, well, how could two young women be dangerous? How could two young women be a threat? And so God protected us, even in our saying no, He protected us, and we proceeded into the country. Another time, once again, Czechoslovakia being very dear to my heart, we were on the border, in the border offices, and we were facing 5 guards seated at 5 tables in a semicircle. The first guard at the first table opened my passport. He saw my name, Vobora. He recognized it, and he instantly changed from cold and threatening to warm and inviting. He said, welcome to our country, with a big smile on his face. And I stood up very proudly and as courageously as I could, and I said, my father was born in Czechoslovakia.
Once you got into the country, whether it was Czechoslovakia, Russia, or any other ones, what happened then? How did you actually deliver the Bible to people? Did you look for those people, or did you already know some circles of people that were, you know, hungry for the Word of God?
We had actually been given names by our director in Austria, whom he had contacted in months or years previous, once again by secret protected means. And so we had names with us of contacts and how many Bibles we were to deliver and addresses and such, and we always carried a map with us. And once again, outwardly we just looked like normal tourists.
And you just gave Bibles? There were no Bible studies? Your job was to give the Bibles?
Bibles and Christian books.
Okay.
People loved books by Billy Graham especially. They knew Billy Graham. In Eastern Europe and Russia, they knew Billy Graham, and they loved his books.
Were you scared?
Oh yes, we're human. We were scared. The border that intimidated me the greatest was East Germany. A lot of Americans know about Checkpoint Charlie in East Germany. And yes, and the Berlin Wall, of course. And yes, we did go through Checkpoint Charlie. The border guard asked us, are you carrying any guns, ammunition, or weapons? Just flat out, just directly ask us that question. And we were 2 young women, not men. So that took me back a little bit. But once again, we got safely through that border.
Did you, one there, did you ever encounter any confrontation? Did you ever get in trouble, jail, anything?
Yes, we did go through confrontation with the KGB in Russia. We did. And that story is described in detail in my book. I hesitate a bit to go into detail on that in my interview because I want people to read the book.
Okay, then we won't go there. We'll leave it for. Did you ever? So when you were there and you met with people, real people, and somehow you dealt with the language and you were able to talk to them, did you see that their faith perhaps was different than of people here who did not have persecution?
Yes, absolutely. There was a, before I ever went to do this, one of my heart cries was, Lord, I want to meet people whose lives are on the line. and who will not give up their faith no matter what. And the Lord answered that prayer when I met these people. Absolutely, people of depth and commitment, and they would not give up. No, absolutely, they would not give up, meaning they would not deny their faith.
What were they looking for? Because I know that, you know, we have, you know, we distribute Word for You Today around the world. We have missionaries that we talk to, and when I talk to some people in Siberia about their missionary work, they said the most common question they hear from people in the very remote areas is, how do I get to heaven? Just, you know, simple. How do I get to heaven? I don't care about theology. I don't care about a lot of things that you guys care about. I just want to be in heaven. Perry, I've heard him say that in Indonesia, people, their first question is, does God love me? And how do I get, you know, to feel that love? What was the question and concerns that you hear from people in the Eastern Bloc back then?
Well, mainly from believers. It's that because of the constant presence of the police or the military, the danger of being detected, the danger of being fined or going to prison was always uppermost. We visited a pastor with a printing press hidden in his apartment building, and we were asking him about the printing press, and he said, "Shh, be quiet. There's neighbors in my building who could report me to the police. If the police knew I had a printing press, they would come, destroy the printing press, and I would go to prison." Yeah. And so we were always, we had to be very, very careful how we spoke and how quietly we spoke in case there would be anyone around who would overhear and report to the police.
It's so true. I mean, even now, sometimes I hear, when I go back, people of the old generation,
yes,
older generations, yes, that say the walls can hear, because there's just ingrained in your memory,
yes,
that you have to, on all important issues, be quiet.
Yes, if I may go further, when I was in Russia, we were visiting in a lovely home, and there was a piano in the home, and I happened to play piano, dearly loved the piano, and dearly loved the song How Great Thou Art. So I sang in English, my partner in Dutch, and our believers' family in Russian. And my emotion was greatly touched, and I started singing loud. And once again, the father became very alarmed. He said, "Shh, we can't do this. Others may report us to the police."
Looking at what's happening now in this country and in the world, and having been there where, you know, in the midst of persecution, does it scare you to see what's happening? Do you see, even though you said Russia was like America 100 years ago, do you see America becoming a little more like Russia in the Soviet Union?
I see America tragically becoming, how do I express it, less interested in God, and needing to be aware that persecution may come our way someday, that God may in fact allow persecution, and Americans to wake up to that, to be aware of that, to accept it, and to say, Lord, we need revival in this country.
No, that would be an answer to prayers. Your book is out. You published it last year, about 40 years since you've been there. You said, you told me before the interview that you have a dream. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. I have a dream that's been in my heart and spirit for years. This is not a spontaneous thing at this point in my life. It's been with me for many years. And that is that a movie should be made on the book that I've written, the stories, not because of me, no, absolutely not, but because of what God brought my partner and I through, and to bring people to Yeshua, to Jesus, and to make them aware, to remind them, to encourage them that if persecution should come to our country, as it may well be the case, that God will always be with us, He will care for us, He will never abandon us, no matter what He may call us to go through.
Yeah. Well, I hope the dreams come true, and maybe if you're listening, and if you're a rich producer or director and would like to take on this project, I think that would make a for a fascinating movie. Kathy, thank you for being with us. I really want you to tell some of the stories, and I'm going to wait a couple of months to have you back. I'm going to let all of you to have a chance to get this book, read it, and maybe then Kathy will be able to tell me some of the stories. Thank you again for being with us, and God bless you.
God bless you. My pleasure.
Kathy Vobora, author of Journey into Darkness. Her book is available on Amazon. Also, Evangel in Medford and Evangel in Grants Pass are carrying it, as well as the Christian bookstore in Klamath Falls. We will put that information on our website, so you can always check it out. Next, we have an interesting interview with Jason Jones, and another one with Candy Marballi, talking about kids and prayer. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at the Dove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on the Dove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back to Focus Today. Well, the 20th century had seen some evil things, several wars, genocide, and a lot of other things that in the beginning of the century we really didn't know that were going to happen. It looked pretty good, and then things turned for the worse. Jason Jones has recently authored a book called The Race to Save Our Century, and our own Steve Johnson had a chance to talk to him, and here's their conversation.
Jason Scott Jones has quite a few things when you look at his CV or his resume. He's a filmmaker and human rights activist. He's president of Movie to Movement and the Human Rights Education Organization. And within all of that, he's also got time to write a book. And that's what we're going to be talking about. The Race to Save Our Century is the name of the book. Jason, this looks like a fairly ominous title, actually, and I find it fascinating how you're kind of looking at it from a historical standpoint. Let's talk a little bit about that, the whole aspect of the race to save our century. What is it you want to save that you've written about in this book?
Well, yeah, the title is ominous, and it might even sound a bit over the top, but my hope was to create a sense of urgency. And what we really want to save, if we were to boil it down to one thing, is it's the understanding of the human person that Western civilization was built upon. And that idea is the idea that the individual human person has an incomparable dignity, beauty, and worth, and that government and the institutions of free civil society really exist to nurture and care for the human person, and especially to care for the human person when they're vulnerable, whether it's the child in the womb, whether it's the elderly, the disabled, or civilians in a war. That a just society is a society built around defending the dignity of the person when they're weak. And Western civilization, through the incarnation of the second person of the Trinity, Jesus Christ, through Christianity, really introduced the idea of the human person that the world accepts today. Ideas like tolerance and respect for civilians and caring for the poor. These are really the fruits of a Christian civilization. And if we erase the Christian understanding of the human person, we'll see those fruits disappear as well.
Now, I know that you go back to like World War I and World War II, and really, the more reading I do, the more one understands how they are tied together. They weren't like totally separate wars. One was World War II, grew out of what happened in World War I, and this is kind of, when you think of the early 1900s, somewhat of a golden era, at least for some people, not for everybody for sure. You go back to World War I. Why is that? What is a starting point reference there?
Well, from 1914 to 2014 were the bloodiest 100 years in the history of man. And we're not just talking about war. Genocides, democides, the state killing of their own citizens in the Soviet Union and in China and to Cambodia. Their numbers, are higher than the casualties from war. And so beginning with World War I in 1914, and my book came out at the end of 2014, that century was the most violent century in the history of man. And just like you said, you can't separate World War I from World War II. It's almost an artificial distinction. Well, obviously, you can't separate the next 100 years from the past 100 years, that they're intimately connected. And the ideologies that led to the tragedy of the 20th century have not gone anywhere. In fact, in many ways, they've morphed into what we call, my co-author and I call, subhumanism, this degraded view of the human person. And so if we want to create a culture of life, if we want our posterity to live in peace, and we have to go about reintroducing and advocating for those principles that a just society are founded upon.
You know, I think it's a perspective that a lot of us haven't really considered how violent and dangerous perhaps the last 100 years is. What have you been able to put your thumb on as to why things have escalated so much in the last 100 years?
Well, I think if you wanted to look at just one point, a loss of respect for the human person. You know, in the late 19th century and the 20th century, this new degraded vision of the human person was introduced into the West, and the inevitable fruit of that was totalitarian socialism, fascism, Nazism, the culture of death today with abortion, assisted suicide, euthanasia, a lack of respect for civilians, and total war. You know, but we looked at 5 ideologies of evil: racism and nationalism, utopian collectivism, radical individualism is another one. That's the one I think that we are battling with today more than anyone. Also, utilitarian hedonism is an ideology of evil that we're struggling with today, and total war. So when we look at these ideologies of evil in the 20th century, we have to ask, do they exist today? When our book was sent to the publisher, our chapter on racism and nationalism, we talked about radical Islam, and we had to look to the Middle East today to see where racism and nationalism really exists and is a real threat. And it's a tragedy that today Jewish families are fleeing Paris, and it's not blonde-haired, blue-eyed National Socialists marching in from Germany that are chasing them away. They're radicalized Muslims flying in from the Middle East. And so the grandchildren of Jews who had to flee Paris are again fleeing Paris. And so we always have this idea that evil is behind us, that genocide is behind us, democide is behind us, total war is behind us, but it's actually beneath us. And we have to be vigilant, especially I would say as Christians. We have a very special duty to share with the world the truth about the human person and the truth about the transcendent moral order, that there is a law above the laws of man, that segregation was not just. You know, that it doesn't matter what the government says, the secret police say, there's a law above the secret police and governments. And as Christians, traditionally, we've been the ones who have had the knowledge and the courage to advance the transcendent moral order, to speak truth to power. And if we want to create a culture of life for our posterity, we have to begin today having a sense of urgency. And one of the things we talk about in the book, I would say, is the first milestone. You know, what can we do as individual Christians in our community? I think the first milestone into a culture of life is full legal protection for the child in the womb. That really the culture of abortion destroys our idea of the human person. Not only does it destroy 1.3 million children a year and damage women and families and communities, but it obliterates the idea of the human person that not only our republic was founded on, but you could say Western civilization was founded upon. So real concrete action would be in our communities, through our churches, advancing the rights of the vulnerable, from the child in the womb to the poor. And once we do that, we can begin to see that we'll take steps out of this kind of culture of death into a culture of life.
Okay. I want to let our listeners and viewers know we're talking to Jason Scott Jones. He's the author of the book called The Race to Save Our Century. Let me ask you about one of the things that you brought up, some of the ideologies of evil, the 5 that you mentioned. One of them you said that we're kind of facing now is radical individualism. What do you mean by that?
You know, radical individualism is the idea that asserts, you know, sort of this idea of autonomy, that it's me over others. We can, for example, in our community, you can go out in your neighborhood, you can take your phone, you can ask Siri for gentlemen's clubs. And in every neighborhood you're in America, they'll pop up. And this is the idea that anything that's consensual, my rights over others, so you'll have grown men going into these establishments with no sense of respect for the vulnerability and dignity of the young women that are exploited in those establishments. The overwhelming, pornography is overwhelming our culture, the decriminalization of drugs across the country. These ideas, this comes from this idea of the radical right of the individual to do what it is that they want and not to look at how it impacts those around them.
Okay, now we've had these clubs and these kinds of places before. It's just been easier to get to them. What is the difference now than, let's say, in the 50s, for example? Well,
in the 1950s, you wouldn't have had pornography streaming into your 8-year-old's telephone.
Oh.
And it's a real tragedy. In 1986, Alan Bloom, I think was sort of a secular philosopher from the University of Chicago, he even wrote then about how sexual immorality is beginning to slip its leash. So we've always had, when I speak to young people about pornography, I tell them that if your great-grandfather, when he was 16 years old, had an iPhone, and on the other side of that, through that phone, he could look at pornography, chances are your great-grandfather, just like you, would have been doing what you're doing. The challenge is this technology. And what we really need to do is be ever more vigilant in protecting the vulnerable and beginning to think in solidarity with the weak. We need to begin to have young men think, when you go into a place like that, how are you participating in the exploitation of the vulnerable? And just because it's consensual or quote-unquote consensual, whether it's the exploitation of illegal migrant labor or the sexual exploitation of young women, even if they believe it's a consensual relationship, these relationships are based upon those with certain privileges and opportunities exploiting the weak. And if we want to have a just society, especially with the power of technology, we have to become increasingly more vigilant. And the church, Christians need to speak up, because if we do not, there will be no one out there to do it. When you look at the challenges that totalitarian socialism and fascism pose to Western civilization, radical individualism, I say, was almost like chemotherapy. It was a medicine that was very useful. Sort of the Anglo-American idea of radical liberty was useful as a partner, or as like almost a medicine, but you can't live off of medicine. And chemotherapy as a medicine is also a poison, it can kill you. And so the radical individualism that we saw as useful in our challenge against totalitarianism today, through the culture of death with abortion, pornography, the exploitation of migrant labor here in the United States, or you can think of the sweatshops in China, in Indonesia, and India abroad. This is where we as Christians have to be vigilant in speaking out, because if we don't, there's no other philosophy or worldview that's going to have the resources that we have to draw from. And it is the gospel of Jesus Christ, it is Christian anthropology, and it is the truth that there's a law above the laws of man.
Do you think Christians have become desensitized to some of the issues that you're talking about, the evil that is around us, so to speak, that you mentioned in your book?
I definitely think that it's overwhelming, and sometimes we have become desensitized. And also we may feel helpless, and then we may feel shame. So many of us we come from the culture. So what our friends and neighbors and family members struggle with, we struggle with the very same things. And so we think because of that, we may not have the right to speak. But I think we're victims of this culture. We come from the culture, so we shouldn't let shame keep us from speaking out. And we also have to be vigilant. Oftentimes we're looking at making peace with the world. Christians are always looking for opportunities to agree with the world, and there's so much that we can agree with the world on. But what we really need to be is a sign of contradiction. And we need to speak truth to power. We need to speak truth for the vulnerable. But as far as, especially when it comes to sexual morality and pornography, I think that, yeah, we've become desensitized. I have a friend who's a famous Hollywood actor who, after becoming a Christian, said, I'm going to practice, I'm not going to kiss a woman till the altar. And we were checking into a hotel. We were on the road promoting a movie, and he refused to take the key to the hotel. I didn't even notice it. On the back of the key to the hotel was an ad for the spa, but it had a naked woman on it. and from her back, and was advertising the spot. I didn't even notice it because I've been so desensitized by media. I just saw a key, but as a young Christian man who's practicing chastity, his eyes quickly noticed it, and he refused to take the key, and they had to go find a box in the back, in their storage facility somewhere with keys that didn't have that image on it. So I think all of us living in, you drive down the road with billboards, and you're at Walmart, and there's magazines in the rack, and it's impossible not to become desensitized.
Well, I'll tell you what, it sounds like you hit on a whole lot of topics here. Let me mention the name of the book again, The Race to Save Our Century, Jason Scott Jones, and he's got 5 core principles talking about some of the issues that maybe you haven't even considered. Jason, thanks for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That was Jason Jones, author of The Race to Save a Century, available on Amazon and all the bookstores. Coming up, we have an interview with Candy Marballi talking about Prayer Covenant for Kids. That's coming up. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at the Dove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market. But at the Dove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio now by Skype with Candy Marballi, the author of The Power of the Prayer Covenant for Kids. You might have heard of the 40-Day Prayer Covenant Ministry, and I guess there is some connection with this book. Good morning, Candy, and tell us how you got the idea for this book and what's the connection with the 40-Day Prayer Covenant.
Good morning. Great. The 40-Day Prayer Covenant was started by Dr. Jerry Kirk 40 years ago, and 5 years ago I was introduced to it and started making the prayer part of my quiet time. And through that prayer, about a year and a half ago, the Lord gave me a vision of this prayer for children, of having this prayer on a card for kids that would speak to their hearts and that would teach them how to pray Christ-centered prayers. And so I called together a team of educators, and we worked alongside of Dr. Jerry Kirk's team, and we developed this prayer. And after that, there were requests for a teaching guide. How do we teach our kids to pray effectively? And so one thing after another, the Lord opened the opportunity up for me to co-author this book with Stephen Iyer. And it was launched at the 414 movement in New York in October, and it's gone global since, which we are thankful for.
So are these the cards that you're talking about that came with the book? I got a bunch of them here.
Yeah.
Okay. Does every book come with them?
Every book will come with 2 cards, and the reasoning is the book was written for 2 purposes. One, we want to teach children how to pray effectively Christ-centered prayers, and 2, the importance of covenantal prayer, kids praying for kids praying for their parents, for their pastors, and so they can use these cards to invite them into a prayer covenant with them for 40 days.
Is the kids' prayer much different from the one we use as adults?
It's more simple. It's simplified language, still 10 themes: grace, love, compassion, repentance, worship, commitment, dependence, influence, discipleship, all prayed in the authority of Jesus' name. And in the children's book, each line of the prayer is beautifully illustrated with a Bible story and a corresponding memory verse. So the kids learn the importance of prayer, the importance of memorizing God's word in their heart.
How do you teach children about repentance?
Well, we teach them we are all sinners and that Christ died to save us. And so we must, since he is a holy God, every day we must ask forgiveness for the sins that we do towards our Heavenly Father and towards our friends or one another. So by just having that repentant heart, I think it places them in a healthy place to pray Christ-centered prayers.
I think a lot of the things can be taught by example. I see that in the beginning of your book, it does say that it's good for kids, for the family, and for the church. So how can the church use this book in their ministry?
Many ways. Since it's broken down into 10 themes, there's a curriculum in the second half of the book. And so that can fit nicely into a Sunday school quarter time frame. It's a great family devotional. It's great for homeschool settings. It's great for VBS. For a 5-day VBS, you can cover 2 themes per day.
All right. And as far as the family life go, I think we all realize the importance of praying with our children, although it's becoming more and more challenging in our times, and maybe that's just an excuse. But what would be your suggestions to families who are just struggling to make that prayer time together work?
Yes, it has to be a priority, and there are creative ways that you can fit it into everyday life. You can put a prayer card at each place setting at the dinner table, and maybe each person around the table can pray one line of the prayer. And you can talk about what your day was like. Did you have a chance to share Jesus with someone? As one of the challenges in this prayer is discipleship. Use me for your glory to invite others to follow you. Or maybe how did Jesus speak to you? And were you able to be used to minister to someone? The Lord makes us channels of His love and grace. So how did they show His love and grace to someone that day? Or maybe they did something wrong and that they're sorry for that. So just strengthening the family prayer time and Bible study time together, I think this enriches that time very much.
That's a great advice. Candy, I know that you're a pastor's daughter and grew up in church and praying, and I want to ask you about the one particular prayer that you had in your life when you were a little girl, praying for a husband, and the way you prayed and how God sent you exactly what you asked for is amazing. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. When I was 16, I was very fearful of choosing a husband. And I had seen marriages that weren't very successful, but I deeply trusted my Heavenly Father, and I asked Him if He would choose the man I was supposed to marry from anywhere in the world and bring him to my front door, because I was even frightened of the idea of dating. And I had complete trust in Him choosing my life partner. And so at the age of 18, my family was in ministry, and we, over the years, had internationals visiting with us. And my parents had invited foreign students many times over the years to enjoy holiday suppers, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas. So I met Vikram Thanksgiving in '81. He had just arrived from America. He was a Hindu, turned atheist. And as my father would often do with all of our international friends, is share the gospel with him. And he started coming to church with us each weekend and had a hunger for things of God and lots of questions. And in late Feb, he gave his heart to Christ. We were married in July, and it's been 32 amazing years. And we partnered together in ministry. And so it's been a great joy.
Wow, and he literally showed up on the steps of your house right in front of you, just like you asked.
God's ways are perfect, aren't they? And that's why I just so want kids to develop an intimate relationship with their Heavenly Father through prayer. And I think also this prayer imprints the gospel on a child's heart. So needed to develop that intimate relationship. And so when they're 15, when they're 17, they won't desert their best friend. They'll remain faithful Jesus followers. And that's the goal.
Is the book available now in all major bookstores?
It's available Amazon.com, theprayercovenant.org, where all the resources for adults and children are there. And it's also on IPHC, International Pentecostal Holiness Church, has adopted it into their curriculum, so it's available at Life Springs as well.
It's a beautiful book. It really is done well. I love the illustrations and just the content as well. Candy, if a church is interested in adopting that as a curriculum, do they just go to one of the websites you mentioned, or do they need to contact you directly? What's the procedure here?
Yes, they can go to our website, www.theprayercovenant.org. They can also email me at marballicandy@icloud.com. I'll answer any questions. But yes, we're here to help.
All right. Well, thank you, Candy. Good luck to you, and hope to see more books from you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. That's it for today. We have more guests coming up for you tomorrow on Focus Today. Have a wonderful day.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.